Okay, so now let's talk about the state's attorney. It's a little bit confusing because we do have the attorney general, and that's different. The state's attorney is actually our local prosecutor. So they represent, that we have one per county, and they represent our county, but they are considered a state's attorney. So why do we need to vote for this person? We're voting for this person because they set the tone and the priority for what cases are prosecuted. So when crime is happening in our county, that person is responsible for saying, okay, we're going to be tough about deterring carjackings, for example. My understanding is that carjackings are way, way, way down. But that is because state's attorneys set the tone for prosecuting those cases to make sure that we're deterring people from carjackings, right? It could also be, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. It could also be that. So if the state's attorney doesn't see domestic violence as a priority, that might mean that they're not going to go after domestic abusers when those cases come up, right? So when someone alleges domestic abuse, if the state's attorney hasn't set the tone that, no, we absolutely need to take this seriously, we need to deter domestic violence, we're gonna prosecute this to the full extent of the law. If that's not their attitude, then those kinds of cases and that specific kind of crime may go undeterred, right? Which means it could occur even more because people don't have the same fear that they have about some other kind of crime. So, state's attorney, we want to be paying attention to who is running for that office, what their priorities are going to be, what sorts of crime are they trying to deter in our county, and whether or not that aligns with, again, what we are concerned about. So if they're not focused on the kinds of cases that are important to you, right, the kinds of crime that you may have knowledge of, then you want to be paying attention to that and bringing that to their attention, because that's the job, right? They are the ones who set the tone. So that's why, again, we have that opportunity to vote for that person. And, it's important to keep in mind, just like with the judge, if certain cases don't go to court, if certain prosecutors don't feel that the evidence is compelling enough for them to make their case, then they may not take it to court. If it's not a priority, they may not take it to court. And so, again, that impacts us, because if we are, for example, victims of those crimes, and we go to a prosecutor and say, hey, this just happened to me, if the state's attorney has set a different priority, we may not get the same attention for our case as we would if it was a priority, right? If I go and say, I would like to prosecute someone because they dumped their pizza box on my lawn, and I want you to prosecute them to the full extent of the law. I've not heard any of the candidates that are running for state's attorneys say that they are tough on litter. And so that is not going to get the same response as, for example, a violent crime, because they are tough on violent crime. So if there is something, certainly not that, but if there is something that is particularly important to you that you believe the state's attorney should be prioritizing among all of the different things that could be a priority, if you think this should be in their top 3, then you want to be paying attention to these candidates and what they're saying they are going to prioritize as you're deciding on who to vote for.